So Hoover Teams, we started to build a team, and then it quickly became a lot more than only a team. We understood that to have a team be successful, or a front end to be successful, you need an ecosystem and you need tooling around it. So not just a bit of code to build a team, but also the community to collaborate on making extensions compatible and to speak around the word of Hoover, so to say. So we really invested in making people happy and have them talk about how happy they get, because that's our only way of marketing. It's people being satisfied. So except for that, there's not much advertising that we do up till to today. So developer happiness, one of our current slogan is e-commerce made happy, and that's because we really believe that by doing only positive things and building great products, we can make everyone happy, from agency to merchant and end user. All of these aspects that I just mentioned contribute to developer happiness, and making people happy is our main goal. So what contributes to developer happiness in our perspective? Less complexity. I think everyone who's touched Magento only for the sliders has seen enough complexity for a lifetime and would like to have less of that. So we believe that all the other modern front ends that are being built are not less complex, but rather more complex. So we're trying really hard to make it simpler. We removed everything that's called Luma, everything that comes with that, HTML files, JavaScript, CSS, and we replaced it with something more elegant and more native browser. So required JS, knockout, all of those things that you might not love to work with are gone. So we went for simplicity. What replaces Luma is semantic HTML that does a lot of the things that we currently do with JavaScript, which is kind of silly, form validation, all those kind of things. Might need a little bit of JavaScript to make it a really good validation, but you don't need a 1 megabyte library to validate an email field. And we put Alpine.js and Tailwind CSS in place, which are tools that are very people are very happy about in the Laravel ecosystem. And I was kind of jealous of what they had, like how much fun the guys working with Laravel had. So those were the first tools I tried to use on Magento to see if we can make people happy with those tools as well. So semantic HTML is easier to write, easier to read, more performant and more accessible out of the box. So everything you replicate that the browser normally does is not really the same thing. So you have to take care of a lot of extra things like accessibility if you build something with pure JavaScript. We don't compile anything that makes a developer looking at a live Hoover store can look at the source code and actually learn from that. And that's something that I experienced 20 years ago when I started building even more my first website. I looked at websites source code to learn how to build websites, and with Hoover you can do the same thing. If you look at any single page application, you see one line of compiled JavaScript, and there's nothing to learn from that. So that's something that I think is important, junior developers being able to step into a new technology. And we offer a lot of tooling around Hoover that makes your life easier. So to build slides and pop-up models and X-intersect, like the scroll into view trigger, a lot of helper methods to help you get and set cookies and all those kind of things that you would normally find in Luma, but with a library of 2 megabytes, we've included all of that, and we still kept the code that we ship to the JavaScript is only 60 kilobytes is what Alpine.js brings. And we use view models very heavily, so that's the same as a helper in Magento, but it has less responsibilities and it's easier to reuse. So we rather compose view models instead of using one helper that's the Magento 1 equivalent of the Mage class. So this is hardly readable on this beamer. This is an example of one view model that we use to implement SVGs inline in the front end, which makes it most performant. So we have a view model where you just say, well, I want to have a card icon, and it just renders that. And it's extendable, and a lot of people in the ecosystem extended on that and built icon packs based on that. Also pretty hard to read. This is a snippet of how you include product sliders. It's pretty easy, but you can find that back if you're interested. You can have a look at our documentation site, and that will show you a lot of code examples. We invested heavily in getting good documentation. Heard a lot of positive things today about people saying that they applaud the quality of our documentation, so that's really great. We have native form validation that uses browser validation, but then adds a little layer of JavaScript on top just to make it more flexible and have extra capabilities there. Aware Digital is one of our partner agencies who helped us implement. No, that was Macopedia. Sorry. Macopedia worked on the JavaScript form validation. In addition to that, we have tools for CSS compilation from the admin, so you can paste any Tailwind code into your admin, and that renders on the front end with all the classes that you need, including the. Oh, that's getting a lot better. So we have the view models that we just had in a screenshot. We built Huva widgets together with Beemeyer, American agency, and that's a good alternative to the page builder, where you have a lot more control over how a page is rendered in the front end without your merchant messing up the design of the store. So they're a bit more restricted, but very powerful. Yeah, this is just an example how you can add banners, and those banners can have fade and slide effects, and it's super easy to customize these. So this is a great starting point for you to build your own widgets as an agency or merchant in-house. And that's a product grid that's also hard to see. So maybe I'll make it in time since a lot of slides are unreadable. Huva widgets are flexible, custom building blocks, very easy to extend for developers, which is, you can't really say that about Page Builder. Of course, it has the experience where you can drag and drop elements in a Page Builder, but then if you want to create a new type of Page Builder element, you can read a lot of documentation before you know where to even start. And widgets, I think, always have been underestimated, very powerful as a tool to quickly build a front end. Towels.dk was built by Hatimeria, Polish agency. That's a great example where they built the whole page, the whole homepage using Huva widgets. And it's a great, it's very consistent, it's elegant, and for them it was a great tool for that merchant to implement content. Unreadable screenshot of our documentation. If you have that URL, you can read. Our documentation nowadays is completely public. It's very extensive. Vinay wrote it, so you know it's good. I build it, then Vinay looks at what I built, and then he asks me questions, and from that learning experience, he documents that, and that becomes the documentation. So we have a great synergy there. We focus on reliability. We think if you invent something once, you shouldn't change it too often. You shouldn't break things just after you release the store. There's an update and you need to do things a different way. We think there's a balance point between keeping something interesting and innovative, adding new features, but at the same time, keeping things reliable, stable, and backward compatible. So when we introduce backward incompatible changes, we try to document it really well. We try to make it as least painful as possible. It has only happened once or twice so far, and when we do, we make it as easy as possible for the end users. So we don't change things often, and we think reliability is more important. An example was our previous card that was built with GraphQL, and it was hard for new developers to learn, because if you haven't done GraphQL customizations yet, it takes a bit of time to learn it, and it wasn't as fast as a service that rendered card. So we just rebuilt it completely, and while we did that, we put the old card into a module that you can still install, and it's completely backward compatible. So if you have an existing store using the old card, you can keep using it, and we will keep supporting it as well. So we try to keep everyone happy there, and a lot of people are very happy that we replaced the old card, because it's easier to hook into third-party extensible third-party extensions. So regarding stability, if you look at other ecosystems, JavaScript-heavy ecosystems, there's a lot of things that come and go and get reinvented and improved. And there's some examples here, like headless and composable Commerce and middleware and Next, Nux, Nest, Remix. And if you build something with React, you used to do that with Redux, and then you rewrote it to hooks when it came out, and then you started using context and then effects. And now they just invented 2 weeks ago dependency injections, so get ready to rebuild your whole code base again. We're not a fan of that. We think to be efficient, you shouldn't change your technology every 6 months. So with Hyvä, we went for something that was proven, people enjoyed working with, and we're planning to keep up with the latest versions of that, but really try to make the upgrades there as enjoyable as possible, and not just reinvent the whole wheel just because we can, because your merchant doesn't like paying for that. So we aim to offer more stability than that other ecosystem. Another example, Alpine version 3 was released almost a year ago. A lot of customers would like to use it, but when we upgrade to Alpine version 3, we want to offer the tooling to automate the rewriting of code that's not compatible anymore. So we're waiting with that so that it hurts the least for the developers working with it, and they're not frustrated because suddenly things don't work anymore and they need to quote a merchant because we have something new that's fancy and that will cost them money, and what's the use? A quote from our friend Peter Jaap. Jaap is not his last name. We've launched our first store 1.5 years ago and kept it up to date with the latest Hyvä releases, and so far it never broke our project. So that's a testament to the effort that we put into. That's a conscious thing that we do. We try to not break things. Included in what we consider the developer experience is also the community that we build and the way that we let people help each other and be active on Slack and ask questions publicly so we can answer those questions publicly so people can see what a friendly folks we all are. And we try to get our agency partners involved in giving support. So they obviously have a lot of experience already, and we try to take them into this community building that we do where starting developers are being helped by more experienced developers. And that way we can scale. We're already up to 2,000 developers on our Slack, and Vina and I are doing the core support. But beside just the two of us, sometimes we need to rush to answer a question because someone from a community already answered it. And that's just a fantastic feeling. That really gives we're in it together vibe. We already have 164 extensions made compatible together with our community. We made the start. We showed them how it should be done. We offered training videos how to do it. We created a lot of examples, but most of those extensions were made compatible by our own customers, and they're all sharing that code together, and that way we got enough extensions compatible to get the extension from extension providers and start provide official support. And that is really a tipping point for us and for our customers, where they can start using Mirasvit, Headworks, MST, Webcall, MageWorks, all those extensions. We're getting more and more native supported compatibility modules there. And we just had our first community event hosted together with IntegerNet. You can see Andreas wearing his crew shirt from the event, and Tore next to him also. It was a really, really great experience. It was a rather small and cozy event because we still had a lot of COVID restrictions, but it was the first time that we met in person and shared experiences, and it was a once in a lifetime thing for me at least to really feel the enthusiasm that people have about the community that we're building and the product. And that growth attracts ecosystems, so it was hard at first to believe all the positivity around Hyvä. People were really skeptic, and then people were still enthusiastic 6 months later and a year later still, and everyone's just having a happy vibe. And slowly also the skeptic people are starting to see that we might be onto something. So one and a half years later, you can't read this, but we have 649 stores live, I think. And this is on BuildWith, so that's public data. You can compare that with other front-end technologies, and we're doing very well in our first year. So in the first year, we surpassed some other Magento front ends. So our growth, we had the first release last year, February only, so it's a bit over a year that we accomplished all of this. 18 releases since then, over 300 agencies working with Hyvä in 45 countries, over 550 unique sites live that we were able to confirm, because in Buildwidth you have, of course, always demo sites and everything, so it's not always apples and pears. And 400 that we know of that are currently being built, and that growth is increasing every day. So back to our ecosystem, we have all of these extension providers making their extensions compatible with Hyvä, and that's a really big step forward, because until now, in the process of the last year, we were a very good solution if you were building a bespoke front end, completely custom or with a lot of custom work, because our customers tell us that they save 30 to 50% in build time doing a front end with Hyvä. But a very large proportion of the market relies on plugins from these extension providers. So having them on board, and Mirasfit only joined recently, and they already have 25 extensions compatible. So that's going really fast, and it's going to open up the market to a lot more people. And we value partnerships. We try to empower partners and not cannibalize them. We started with the compatibility modules to show them how it should be done, and then use that to help them learn how to make the rest of their extensions compatible. We have training on our YouTube channel where you learn how to go from a Luma extension and rewrite that to Hyvä. Fina made that recording, so it's very good. There's over 32 videos there, very extensive. And we did one-on-one trainings with these extension providers, just asking where they get stuck and teaching them how to work with Hyvä. So we're trying to collaborate with them instead of going on into competition with them. Another hard-to-read slide. We're building a whole new checkout that's very PHP-driven, so all the logic lives in the backend, hardly any JavaScript in the front end, and it's pretty great. We're in the alpha version currently. It will take 1 to 2 months to get to the beta version. At that point, we'll start to onboard more agencies to test it and also have the first stores in production. So I think next quarter, maybe a bit later, we'll have a first release there. And it's built with MageWire, which is a really cool technique. I won't go into that now, but if you have time, it's like you have Livewire for Laravel, and people are super enthusiastic about that. And then one developer, Willem, who currently works for us, he decided to bring that experience to Magento. So he ported a Livewire to Magento, called it MageWire. He showed it to us, and we instantly hired him. And then we said, okay, so what are we going to have you build? So let's take the most complex thing, a checkout. So that's what he's been doing for 10 months already. We had him rebuild it from scratch 2 times. So we're on the 3rd iteration with a really good layout system that makes it super extendable and customizable. So not this kind of layout XML, but this kind of layout XML. So you can define steps and validation logic per step in layout XML. And then in the front end, you only need to write HTML, CSS, and that developer experience is pretty great. We have 10 agencies currently testing it, and all of them are super enthusiastic about it. So that really pumps us up. And that's something, if we're talking again about working together with partners, not against them, we decided to do this together with One Step Checkout because they're the biggest one in the marketplace. For over 10 years already, they've been the biggest checkout provider. So we approached them, we said, well, rather to go into competition with you, we would like to do this together and learn from each other and build the best possible product. So we're taking a lot of learnings from them. They helped us build the payment API in the front end. Anton from One Step Checkout is brilliant in that respect. So he gave us a lot of insights there. Yeah, that's a great partnership that we're looking forward to really launch that product as well. And finally, learning Hyvä is a small step for existing Magento developers. because we use a lot of the stack that you're already familiar with. We just remove the complex parts from the front end and put something simpler there in place. So we hear a lot of developers getting productive within the first week. Of course, there's still a learning process, and as an agency, you need to build up a library of tools with every project so you can reuse stuff maybe and get a bit faster in that. But we hear from agencies that have done a couple of implementations that they get 30 to 50% faster build times. And that means that the merchant pays, it should mean that the merchant pays 30 to 50% less on a build. And they can actually spend that on marketing or new features instead of just the core basics of their store. So the cost for training developers is low if they already know Magento. I should say that because learning Magento as a framework is, of course, still difficult. If you already have a JavaScript developer that knows React and Vue, you might want to consider doing single-page applications with them. So I'm not going to say that Hyvä should be the one tool for every agency. I just think that for the 80% of the market, this is the more sane solution because doing a really good PWA is a lot of work and it needs a lot of experience, so it's usually also more expensive for the merchant. If you're able to just build things, you'll be more productive and happier doing your work, and if you do it well, you get the satisfaction of green circles in Lighthouse and Core Web Vitals. Out of the box, we offer maximum performance, and if you understand how not to ruin that score and you're able to hold back your marketing department, not to add 10 tracking pixels and a chat box, etc., then you might still have green circles in production. And that's not something you see a lot on e-commerce front ends. Where with Luma you would start with 45 out of the box, and from there you first need to bring it up and then you add features and then it goes down again. With us you just start at maximum and then you can start ruining it yourself. Response from Aaron Moss is here today as well. I think they launched a new project this month, and he's in a nutshell very excited because this says 99, 100, 100, 100, and he shared within our Slack community that they are now fighting for the 1 extra point so they get confetti in Lighthouse. So these are not just, it's not a marketing claim that you can get 100 points in production. It just depends. In the end, it's also just a number. It's nice to have a high performance, but of course you also need to convert customers and have those tracking pixels sometimes because that makes you money. So there's a balance there, and at least with us, you have 100, you might keep it, or you might end up with 50 and not start with 45 and end with 0. And the most important sentence that is somewhere here in the unreadable area, the merchant and the dev team are buzzing. So everyone involved in the project is just really hyped about working with Hyvä. And that's something, if you hear at the marketplace stand today, all the existing customers coming to us and just, I'm sure you're tired of hearing this, but we're just so happy and we want to do more and more and more Hyvä. And that's really our main goal, is really to make the developer experience and our end customers happy. So it seems we're actually doing it. So we have a sponsor booth if you haven't visited us already. We also have a little competition. If you post a nice photo on social media and tag it with Hyvä swag, you could win a backpack and cap and a hoodie. And I'd like to thank you for listening. I'm actually within time. That's fantastic. That might be the first time. So this is new for me. Does anyone have any questions? I'll start with you, Ami.
That might be technical. Mine is not technical.
It's still a valid question.
Where did you get your shoes?
Nike.com, and it was a single page application, and it was the worst experience I ever had. This is a good one. I placed it in the cart and it didn't do anything. I couldn't click on the cart thing, so I understood as a developer I should clear my cache probably, because that's what you need to do as an end user. And then I reloaded it, and then I could add it to the cart, and then I checked out and I got to some marketing page that said enter your order confirmation number to see the status of your order, and I hadn't even seen the confirmation screen. It just jumped past it. So I placed an order, I paid for it, but I didn't even have a confirmation number. So I think I don't want to bash on PWAs or single page applications necessarily. I just think there's still a way to go to make that experience great, and it still needs to mature. And as long as the JavaScript frameworks underneath that are still moving every 6 months, it's just really hard. They've refactored PWA Studio 6 times to get extensibility into it and different state management, and it keeps going, and they never reach a point where they have a stable, full-featured product. And we had that at launch in February. We worked on Hyvä for 5 months, and we had more features than PWA Studio. Yeah.
So obviously Adobe are very excited about microservices, pulling everything out of the core. So you've got a tiny stripped down core. Will that still work with Hyvä?
A tiny stripped down core is something that has been mentioned, but is still a concept. So I'm working together with them and with a couple of other community members on a Magento open source task force, where we speak every 2 weeks with Adobe for at least an hour with their technical lead and with Eric Irway, Nicole Cornelson, and we talk about having this version of Magento that's slimmed down and get rid of a lot of these dependencies that are, you can't disable the card because then the whole Magento doesn't work anymore. That's something that should be fixed ideally. So that's something that we want to address with MageOS, and if we can, together with Magento Association and Adobe. It's just, we've been talking about that for quite a while now, and the past 2 months there hasn't really been movement because the decision makers are still making decisions. And we don't know what that means. It's just being postponed all the time. So maybe next week they call us, tell us we're doing it, or they're not doing it. But hopefully we'll get a long-term support version of Magento and a short-term version, and the short-term support version would be owned by the community, which sounds fantastic. So we're trying to make that dream reality, and we do that with or without Adobe. Microservices tying into the monolith, as long as they want to keep supporting the monolith for at least 5 more years. They want to do this LTS thing and keep very long-term support on the monolith. That's something that they said they're going to do. That's one promise that we got, and hopefully that's also the final thing that we're going to get. That would mean that for Adobe Commerce, the monolith will remain a backwards compatible or like a fallback mechanism to do all your database logic, your stock management and everything. And then you can choose which microservices hook into that. So as long as they are working on that, that should in theory also always work with Hyvä. It's just the front end, but we only touch the front end. So everything that Adobe comes up with that ties into the monolith, ties into our monolith as well. We just need to do a bit of the front end implementation because we got rid of all the nasty code there. Yes?
Hi. Do you currently have integration with Contentful or even Storyblogs, or do you plan?
So we have a community for that, and that's fantastic. There's a Prismic and Storyblock implementation. Prismic done by Argentos, Storyblock by Media Lounge here in the UK. They're fantastic. They're really good integration. So if you're looking to put content outside of Magento, that's a really good place to go. I've heard good things about both. If your merchant has a lot of budget to spend, maybe Storyblock would be the better choice. Prismic is supposed to be the somewhat cheaper choice. But this, Argentos only does Prismic content management on small and very large stores, and it works really well for them. Yes?
You said that you didn't want to use a full front-end stack to avoid the continuous changes on any libraries like Vue or React. At the same time, you picked up technologies like Tailwind and Alpine, which are like 3 years old almost, or 4 maximum.
But they get a new version every 6 or 12 months that bring new features that are great.
Agreed. And you're keeping your version to 2.8 of Alpine while 3 is out for a year now. How does this work? Are you going to be, you need to decide whether to just break compatibility after a point or just think kind of like a Magento frontend?
So what we do is keep backward compatibility everywhere we can. What the builder of Alpine.js did was rename attributes just for the sake of doing that. And we try to explain him that that's not a really nice thing to do. So hopefully we'll see less of that. On the other hand, it's not the biggest change that you could have there. It's not like the whole platform changed and now we went from Redux to hooks and to dependency, which is a completely reinvention of how that technology works. Actually, the upgrade to Alpine v3 is rather small. It's just we set different priorities to work on first, and we wanted to really put in the effort to test through, to have a command line tool where you just say run the upgrade, and it just rewrites xspread to xbind, which is one of the stupid things that he decided to rename. So we're dependent on that, unfortunately, but we try to build the bridge between that to make it still enjoyable for you to offer the tooling. So this normally wouldn't have taken 12 months to implement, rather 2 or 3. It's just that we're not a lot of people who we set priorities, and Alpine 2 worked really well. A lot of customers already switched to version v3 without many issues. So we have live stores running on Alpine v3. It's not that complicated. Now that we worked out most of the other important things, if a new update would come along, we would update it much faster. But the reason we haven't done it yet is because if we do it well. So we don't just say, oh, by the way, the next upgrade will break your Alpine code, and good luck.
Just next year or half a year now, Alpine 4 will come on. So you need to catch up.
Yeah, so hopefully by then he got our message, and he understands not to just rename things unless it's really necessary. And I mean, there's good things about that release because he rewrote some things from scratch that were more performant. So you see a slight performance increase, even better when you go to v3. But yeah, ideally we wouldn't have breaking syntax changes there. New features, no deprecations. Cool.